All right, we're going to start off chapter 12 with using some trigonometry to find certain sides of our right triangles. Okay, now those sides that you look for is really going to depend on what angle that we're looking at. So your opposite and your adjacent sides is going to depend on the angle. All right, so let's first define what all these functions are. So with sine, switch colors here. So with sine is going to give us opposite over hypotenuse. All right, cosine is going to give us adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is going to give us opposite over adjacent. Okay, over here on this side we have cosecant, and cosecant is going to give us hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is going to give us hypotenuse over adjacent. And cotangent is going to be adjacent over opposite. Okay, this little chart of these 6 functions you're going to have to refer back to a lot, so that way you can use these kind of as a word bank to kind of figure out what sides we need to find for these right triangles. All right, so let's go ahead and try this. So example 1 says find the values of the 6 trigonometric functions for angle B. Again, we're looking at angle B. All right, so let's go ahead and define what these sides are now that they gave us the measures of these sides. All right, so here's my right angle. So I know opposite of that is my hypotenuse. Okay, and since we're using angle B, that means this side right here is the adjacent side, and 15 is the side opposite from angle B. It's across from it, so we'll call that the opposite side. So we'll just do this, set up here like we did above, and the sign is opposite over hypotenuse. So I've got 15 over 17. I've got my cosine, which says adjacent over hypotenuse, so I need 8 over 17. And I've got my tangent, which is opposite over adjacent, 15 over 8. I'm going to go over here to this side, and I'm going to find the cosecant. And cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, so I've got 17 over 15. Oops. I've got my secant, which is hypotenuse over adjacent, 15 over 8. Last but not least, we have cotangent, and that's adjacent over opposite, so I've got 8 over 15. And that is how we find our 6 functions. All right, now it won't always be this easy to where they have all 3 sides there. When you have all 3 sides, you can go ahead and put them all together. Now, if you look at example 2, I'm going to zoom in. Example 2 doesn't have... Example 2 just gives you a ratio, and it's saying the tangent of angle B equals 3 over 7. So 3 and 7 are part of my right triangle. So if I have tangent, I look up here, and tangent is telling me opposite over adjacent. So that means 3 over 7 is opposite over adjacent. So we have the opposite side, we have the adjacent side, but we don't have the hypotenuse. All right. So in order for us to find that hypotenuse, we're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem. And we did that yesterday for our assignment. And the Pythagorean theorem is going to tell us that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember, c squared is always your hypotenuse, okay? Now, when we're doing the problem solving aspect, you can put a as your opposite or you can put b as your opposite. It doesn't really matter at this point. So because we have opposite and adjacent, we'll just go straight down where it says opposite plus adjacent equals hypotenuse. So opposite is 3. So I'm going to have 3 squared. Adjacent is going to be b. So I've got 7 squared equals c squared. All right, so we'll go ahead and square these, and we get 9 plus 49 equals c squared. And we end up with 58 equals c squared. Okay. Now, we can't leave it as c squared, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. And I get the square root of 58 equals c. So that means my hypotenuse is the square root of 58. So now that I have all 3 sides, I can go ahead and figure out what the remaining functions are. So what I would do is set up as sine, whoops, let me get back up here. Here we go. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Now I have everything I need. My opposite is going to be 3. And my hypotenuse is the square root of 58. All right, now here's where the tough part is. Sometimes you'll have a square root in the denominator, sometimes you won't. Sometimes there'll be simple fractions like this you have over here. But when we do have a square root in the denominator, we have to perform multiplication. So we're going to multiply like we did in the previous chapter by that root in the denominator. Okay, so by us doing that, we are getting rid of that root in the basement or in the denominator. So we end up with 3 times the square root of 58. And the square root of 58 times the square root of 58 just removes the square root. So we are left with 3 times the square root of 58 over 58. And at this point, you can simplify our fractions if we need to. So the sign of this would be 3 times the square root of 58 over 58. And that's the answer to sine. All right, now what we'll need to do now that we have the tangent and the sine, you'll just need to go back in and you're going to have to find your cosine, your cosecant, your secant, and your cotangent.